entrepreneurial, leadership, intellectual. This is the Cultural Connections Podcast.
Alrighty, and good evening, everybody, or good day, everybody. My name is Brian Owens, and I am the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections Podcast. Before I introduce our guest today, I want to remind everyone that we are recording this episode live on Saturday, February 22nd, 2025. This is a two-thing here where we're kicking off the year 2025 with our first episode of the podcast in 2025. So happy New Year to everyone. And secondly, this is also season 3 kickoff for the Cultural Connections podcast as well. And we are delighted with our guest today, a returning guest who you may say looks familiar. If you just closely watched the opening of the Cultural Connections podcast, you saw him at the very beginning there under the entrepreneurial little subcategory thing there, that when we talk about different categories on this podcast. So we are welcoming back to the podcast today for a second time. He joined us way back in the early days of the podcast when we started, and he was such a popular guest that we're bringing him back today, and that is Mr. Christopher Fussner. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome, and good morning from sunny Singapore.
Well, thank you. And a little bit here on Chris. Chris is an international businessman, philanthropist, and contributor to various nonprofit organizations. He possesses a deep knowledge of and experience in Asia, having lived and worked in the region for 38 years. Mr. Fussner founded and owns Trans Technology Pte. Ltd. in Singapore in 1998, a major distributor of surface mount technology and semiconductor capital equipment. Now, in our last episode of the podcast, we did touch upon some of the things that we're discussing today, but I think we ran out of time. We didn't get a chance to, because there's so much to learn about you that we didn't get a chance to get into full detail. And so we are going to continue that discussion basically today. But again, for those that did not see that first episode, I'd love for you to just give a little bit further about your background to our viewers. And again, to our viewers at home, if you do have a question while we are live, please feel free to comment those below, and we'll do our best to get them answered live. So if you want to introduce yourself again a little bit further, that would be great.
Chris Fussner. I'm here in Singapore. I first came to Asia in 1973 with a backpack, and it made quite an impression on me. I went overland from Europe to Singapore via, and you can't do it anymore, via Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Nepal. I lived in Nepal for 6 months, then traveled throughout Southeast Asia. I went back to George Washington University, and I switched what I was studying. So I started studying Asian studies, Asian politics, and Chinese language. So it was the beginning of a great international career. I then went overseas yet again. I was looking for a job actually in Asia. I couldn't get anything at that time. So I worked with Catholic Relief Services in West Africa on a food program. So anyhow, then from there, came back to the United States, worked as a refugee resettlement officer in Malaysia with all the boat people. And actually, I should send you a very interesting article that Wall Street Journal did on me. And the article begins with me killing rats. So anyhow, in the refugee camps. From there, I taught English in Korea for a while, and then went to a great school called Thunderbird. And after Thunderbird, finally got a job with an American electronics company. And shortly after that, set up my own company called Trans Tech. And that was in 1988. I set the company up with about 55,000 US dollars at the time. So And that's the registered capital. And right now we have close to 100 people and 13 countries. So that's a short, a very short synopsis. So.
That very interesting background there. Well, our goal here on this podcast is to dive deep into who you are as a person, learning more about your background, your work, and also your drive for philanthropic work as well. So I'm going to dive here into my first question here, which is about going further back than just college, thinking about your childhood. What would you say when you think of your childhood? What childhood experiences influenced your work, that influenced you in your work today?
Wow, that's a big question. Uh, I don't know. I was raised Catholic and went to Catholic schools, and they always instilled in us charity and helping others. So I think that was a big part of it. And my mother at the time used to bring in foster babies to care for before they were sent for adoption. I think that could have been part of the whole thing. So, and then later in high school, it was again, it was Catholic high school. And one thing that was very interesting that we did is myself and a friend were in this experimental program. It's called Project Share, and it had high school seniors going into the homes of immigrants, probably illegal immigrants, and teaching them, working with them in English and helping them with their homework. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Absolutely. And again, for those that are just tuning in, you are watching the season 3 kickoff to the Cultural Connections podcast. We're joined back today with a returning guest of Chris Fussner. Chris is the CEO and founder of Trans Technology in Singapore, and a major distributor of surface mount technology and semiconductor capital equipment, and also has a lot of philanthropic work that he does. So we're going to get into all of that today. And if you have a question that you'd like us to ask, please feel free to comment below, and we will do our best to get your questions asked during this live broadcast. My next question then to you here is, are there any individuals then that inspired you to become the person that you are today?
Again, another tough question. I guess all the sisters, so the teachers, Catholic sisters in high school, and my mother, I would say. I had one teacher, Mrs. Warren. She wasn't a sister. She was married with kids. And she got me on 3rd grade. She got me down the road of international relations or global history. So long time ago.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. My next question then here to you is, did you have any influence, now we're moving forward a little bit further in time, did you have any influential experiences while at GW that shaped you as a person that you are today? If so, who are they? Same thing, what about Thunderbird? Does Thunderbird what does Thunderbird prepare a student for, and how did your experience at Thunderbird influence your life direction?
GW, as I explained before, I was studying U.S. economic history. And then I took that big backpack trip from Europe to Singapore across Asia. And that was a big influence. Then when I went back to GW, I started studying Chinese, Asian politics, Asian history. And that was very big influence on me. Great professors there for everything, and a great experience. Thunderbird, after doing these nonprofit jobs around the world, my mother kept complaining to me that I had to start making money. And so I went to Thunderbird and studied international business, and that was quite helpful. And then I worked for a US company in Korea for a while, and then started up Transtech. So what I learned in Thunderbird was quite helpful. Yeah, very
Oh,
helpful. It got you in a business framework.
that's great. I think that's definitely great. And let's move forward here then to what made you decide after graduating college to go out to Asia? What was the motivation? Was this your first experience?
Well, I went to Asia actually between in undergraduate when I took that backpack trip and went across places you can't go now. Of course, you can go to Turkey, but Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, lived in Nepal. I should say, in Nepal, I met this Jesuit priest, and his name is Father Watran. He's passed away, but he had these medical mobile clinics. And as I started making money, started contributing to them. And now uh, I have, with the help of Catholic sisters and the Jesuits in Nepal, we've expanded this program to where now it reaches about 160,000 patient visits a year in 6 different locations in Nepal. Each location has a four-wheel drive vehicle, and from that location, we go out to yet another 20,000 uh, 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 about 20 different locations in Nepal. And
Hmm.
this provides primary health care to the people in very poor areas of Nepal. So anyhow, that's a long answer.
No, I mean it's impressive. It's very impressive. Um, let's then move along the lines. We're going to jump back and forth around here. I'm going to get into a little bit more of your philanthropic work in a minute. But how did you end up launching a business then in Asia?
I worked for a US company in Korea, and very interesting. I'm not an engineer. I got the job because I spent time in Asia before, and because uh, I studied the language. I studied Korean and Chinese, and they thought they could teach me technology, and which would be easier than teaching an engineer how to do business in Asia. And it proved quite correct. I did very well
Hmm.
with them. I eventually left them and set up my own company in Singapore and Taiwan with people that I worked with. Uh, Subsequently, I left the American company and then bought out everybody. So now I own the whole company. We don't do Taiwan anymore, but what we did is I expanded in Southeast Asia, India, and then 12 years ago to US, Mexico, Canada, Honduras. So.
Wow, very, very impressive. Um, I'm going to again just remind our viewers that are just tuning in with us. If you're watching, this is the Cultural Connections podcast. We're kicking off season 3 with a very favorite returning guest, Mr. Chris Fussner, and we are talking today about Chris's work as an international businessman and the founder and owner of Trans Technology PT Ltd in Singapore, a major distributor of surface mount technology and semiconductor capital and equipment. In addition, talking about his philanthropic work as well. Let's move along. So if you have a question you'd like us to answer, please feel free to comment below, and we'll do our best to get them answered while we are live here on the podcast. My next question then brings us along to the lines of what what influenced your leadership model? You described how you established a positive relationship with those with whom your company works. That isn't the norm usually for a CEO of a business. So why do you do it? And was there a role model that you were emulating?
Yeah, role models. I don't. I just. Even before I started my company, I started contributing money to the program in Nepal. So as I made more money, I gave more money. So now I am the sole donor to this program. Uh, so in the Bible, and my
Hmm.
Jesuit friends told me what section. I believe it's Mark, or Matthew. Anyhow, it's to whom much has been given, much is expected. And I
Hmm.
sort of take that to heart. I've
Yeah.
been very fortunate to have this company at the right place at the right time with the right connections. And so it's helpful uh, to give back.
Oh, absolutely. And let's continue then on the topic of giving back. It's not just Nepal that you've given back to. You've given back all over the world, practically speaking here. In particularly, I think most recently, I think one that catches a lot of people's attention with the stuff going on is over in the Ukraine. Let's just talk about in general some of the philanthropic work you have done over the years and the impact that it has had.
Well, it's different. It's different subjects of philanthropy. So in with George Washington University, a classmate of mine, his name is David Shambao. He's probably America's top China expert, and I help his program, the China Policy Program. So that's again education, higher education. And then also at GW, I help with the Grameen program and with Lamia and, of course, Professor Yunus, our good friend, who is now Prime Minister of Bangladesh. So I was in contact with him before he went back to Bangladesh. And I said, I'm really, you have to stay in contact with me. I'm worried that you might go to jail, but now he owns the jail. So anyhow, he's doing reasonably well. I talked to Lamia the other day, his chief of staff. They're doing good. Yeah, so that's with GW. I also help Singapore Repertoire Theater and supporting Shakespeare in the Park, where they have a Shakespearean month festival outdoors, and I am the presenting sponsor. And this year it will be Macbeth. So
Hmm.
we did Macbeth about 14, 15 years ago. So I guess we're bringing it back. So, but that's
And
another cultural snapshot here in Singapore on performing arts. Uh, I've also helped Grand Teton Music Festival in Jackson, Wyoming, and I sponsor Patriotic Pops, which is the 4th of July outdoor uh, outdoor symphony. And recently, with a group I'm with called IDU, International Democracy Union, I I made a trip to Ukraine, and I was told that we had to bring something. Chris, send me money. We have to buy something. Uh, we can't go empty-handed. And I'm thinking, oh, flowers, chocolate, Stinger missile, machine gun. And he says, no, bring a used ambulance. So I sent money to IDU Munich. We bought an ambulance and we handed it to the Ukrainian forces in Kiev. Then I found out that the Ukraine has it should come as no surprise, has a acute shortage of ambulances. So
Mm-hmm.
through Ukrainian politicians, whose name is Poroshenko, through his international secretariat, she introduced me to an American NGO called Ukraine Focus. And Ukraine Focus delivers ambulances to Ukraine and has done. So I gave him some money, and the first thing he said to me is, Chris, you want to go drive an ambulance? And I said, okay, because I'm always up for an adventure. So we drove an ambulance from Slovakia to Pokrovsk in Donetsk. So if you know
Mm.
your geography, it was near the front line, about 15 miles from the front line. Now it's about a mile from the front line. So,
Wow.
anyway, and then I did another ambulance drive from Utah Beach after the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And then we drove across Europe and we had about 40 ambulances with us. And we delivered them to Bucha in Ukraine. So this group, Ukraine Focused, has donated and driven over 350 ambulances to Ukraine.
Incredible, absolutely incredible work. What would you say then of the philanthropic work that you do? How has this impacted and shaped the person that you have become as a leader of your company?
It's the other way around. Being the
Oh,
leader of my company gives me the money and the time to do philanthropy.
hmm, I see. Okay,
Yeah, yeah. Not really the other way around.
that makes sense.
It's good to be head of your own company. Then it's like, oh, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Ukraine for 2 weeks, and I'll be back.
All right, absolutely. Again, I just want to remind our viewers that are just tuning in again. If you are just tuning in, you're watching or listening to the Cultural Connections podcast. We are live on Saturday, February 22nd, 2025, kicking off season 3 and the year 2025 on the Cultural Connections podcast with guest Chris Fussner, a returning guest of the podcast. Chris is the CEO and the founder of Trans Technology in BT Ltd in Singapore, a major distributor of surface mount technology and semiconductor capital equipment. We're mostly here today to talk about his philanthropic work that he does in addition to leading a company, and that is where we continue our discussion. So if you have a question for Chris that you would like answered during the podcast today, please feel free to comment below and we'll do our best to get it answered for you live. Within the next, we're coming close towards the end of the podcast. We still have around 5 or 6 more minutes left. But I would like you now let's think about the fact that there's the next generation of leaders that are fast approaching. And what would you say? What is your message? What message do you have for the next generation of leaders looking to start their own company?
Many years ago, I used to give this lecture at Thunderbird, and it's called Entrepreneurship and Philanthropy. And then I've been asked to give this lecture, this maybe 15 years ago. I haven't given this lecture since. COVID, busy, I don't know. Anyhow, it was very interesting. So first is philanthropy. Think about starting your own company. Think about it. You're going to have to first work, most people first work with someone else and get to know industry, get to know a business, and then you have to see what are you going to do. And maybe it's with classmates at college, or maybe it's alone, or whatever. So start looking at doing your own business, and it may not come to you immediately. It may take a few years. Secondly, after you make money, then you can be a philanthropist. But if you don't have money, It's very difficult to be a philanthropist. You can be a
Mm.
humanitarian, like all those Catholic sisters that run a medical mobile clinic, but you're not well, you're giving your time. I guess that's a gift, but we're giving money. So you have to make money before you give it. That is the truth of the matter. So, and that's about it.
Hmm. Okay. Well, then my next question then to you would be is how would you describe, let's put it in perspective here, bring it all back to perspective. How would you describe your life mission if it starts with creating a successful business and ends in selling a successful business? What is your life mission then?
Successful business is relatively easy. You treat everyone as if you would want to be treated. So you treat your employees, your suppliers, and your customers very well. So in every office, we have a thing like this. And if we don't take care of our customers, somebody else will. So you have to be very committed to your clients and make them successful. Yeah, you can make money, but don't try to nickel and dime your
Right.
clients. Try to help them, especially what I do. I'm in capital equipment. So if someone's going to give you $1 million purchase order and buy $1 million of equipment from you, they trust you. And they trust you to take care of the equipment, to train their people, to install, and if there's any problems, to help them out and solve the problem. So you have to do
Yeah.
that. You have to be very committed, but you have to be, so you're committed to, to, to your suppliers, clients, and employees. And if you do that, you'll be well taken care of. Look, yeah, those three, if you take care of those three pillars or those three entities, they will take care of you. The employees will stay with you. So I have employees that have been with me since day one, 38 years. I have other employees, 25 years, 28 years, long time. I've been representing Yamaha and Heller for 38 years. And I've had clients, some of the ones long ago have, well, some of them still around, some of them have moved on, but uh, I've had clients for years and multiple orders. So I've had small companies that I've worked with, and all of a sudden that small company bought, I don't know, $20 million worth of equipment from. So.
I mean, it's it's all very obviously very impressive, and the mission behind it all, I think, is what says it all, and the importance of showing of what you have explained today, of showing being a successful businessman and entrepreneur shows as well of how it's not just about the business, but doing what you can to help others as well. And I think that's what's so impressive here. Hard to believe, but we are already reaching yet the end of our half-hour long podcast. I always say every single episode goes by faster than the last one, and it has been delightful to bring you back on for a second time as one of our more
Thank you,
popular
Brian.
guests here on the podcast. Thank you.
And I
If
think
you
you
have,
should bring your aunt and yourself to Singapore. It's now, oh, let me check. Oh, it's 78 degrees. It's a little chilly out here. Told me
yes,
Boston is about 14 degrees.
right. Yes, it's a little chilly over here. That is for sure. Well, that is, if I can get her, that is definitely our goal. But I want to thank you again for taking the time to join me today. If you have questions, if our viewers have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes of the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me directly via email at brianives@gmail.com. That's BRIANIV as in Victor ES @gmail.com. And we are hoping to have more episodes coming up throughout the next couple of weeks. So continue to keep it tuned with us as we have some exciting episodes coming your way of the podcast. For now, I'm Brian Adams. I'm the producer and host of the Cultural Connections podcast. Thanks for watching, and we will see you again next time on the Cultural Connections podcast. Thanks for watching.
Thank you again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to check out our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also watch this episode again in its entirety on our YouTube channel. This podcast is also available on listening platforms Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Radio Public, and New TV. Thanks again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast.